She had already made the choice before she understood it. The suitcase stood near the wall, closed. It had been there since morning. Maybe longer. No one remembered seeing her place it there. No one noticed when it became part of the room. She moved around it without touching it. Careful steps. Small adjustments to avoid its edges. Some people would have said she was decisive. Others might have thought she was simply done. The room offered no opinion. The suitcase did not ask questions. It did not remind. It only stayed where it was. She folded things slowly, even after everything was already inside. A shirt smoothed twice. A sleeve aligned with nothing in particular. Each movement felt final without feeling loud. There were habits she followed to keep her steady. Standing near the same corner. Sitting only when her back met the wall. Letting her hands rest at her sides instead of reaching. The suitcase anchored the space. It made the room smaller without moving. It claimed a future she had not examined closely. She told herself this was necessary. Not in words. In posture. In the way she avoided looking at what she was leaving behind. Some things in the room no longer belonged to her. Not because she had given them away, but because she had already stepped past them in her mind. She checked the zipper once. Then again. The sound was brief, almost polite. The suitcase remained sealed. Everything she planned to take was already inside. Everything else stayed where it had always been. There was a faint pressure beneath her calm. Not doubt. Not fear. Something quieter, pressing upward without shape. She did not pause to examine it. Pausing had caused trouble before. Pausing led to questions. Questions led to reversals. The suitcase suggested none of that. It suggested direction. She stood still for a moment, facing away from it, as if distance could soften commitment, as if not looking might keep the choice incomplete. From the outside, it would have looked simple. A person preparing to leave. A room returning to emptiness. From within, something had already shifted. A thin misalignment. So small it felt harmless. She believed clarity would follow action. That understanding would catch up later. That regret, if it existed at all, belonged somewhere far ahead. The suitcase stayed closed. The room stayed quiet. And the first part of the mistake settled in. Unnoticed. She stayed with the decision longer than she expected. Not by extending it, by living beside it. The suitcase remained where it was, unmoved. Its presence no longer felt temporary. It felt assigned. She adjusted her day around it. Paths through the room changed slightly. Steps shortened. Turns became careful. Nothing required explanation yet. That was part of the comfort. She sat on the edge of the bed without facing the suitcase. Not avoidance. Positioning. Her attention settled on smaller things. The sound of fabric when she shifted. The quiet resistance of the floor beneath her feet. Details that did not ask her to reconsider. Time passed without shape. Not slow. Not fast. Just unmarked. She told herself there was nothing left to decide. That the important part had already happened. That the rest was procedure. The suitcase supported that belief. It waited without urgency. It did not lean toward the door. It did not signal readiness. She touched the handle once, only to confirm its weight, only to feel something solid. The handle was cool, familiar enough to feel earned. She let go quickly. There were moments when the room felt incomplete. Not empty. Unbalanced. She noticed how often her eyes returned to the same spot on the wall. How rarely they crossed the space between her and the suitcase. How easy it was to pretend the distance meant nothing. The choice had given her structure. It told her what not to do, what not to think about. She followed that structure carefully. Some people might have called this resolve. Others might have mistaken it for calm. Neither word fit from where she stood. There was a quiet narrowing in her awareness. Not panic. Not resistance. A gradual closing, like a door pulled shut without sound. She did not push against it. The suitcase stayed sealed. It carried everything she had decided to keep. It excluded everything else by default. She believed this separation was clean. That loss could be managed through organization. That regret, if it came, would arrive clearly, with warning. She stayed near the decision, close enough to feel its outline, far enough to avoid its weight. The room accepted this arrangement. So did she. For now, something began to press through the calm. Not suddenly. Not enough to stop her. Just enough to disturb the surface. The suitcase did not move. It felt closer, as if the space around it had tightened. As if the room had shifted its weight without warning. She noticed changes she had not planned to notice. How the handle caught the light at certain angles. How the shadow beneath it stretched farther than before. How often she adjusted her stance to avoid facing it directly. The structure she had relied on started to thin. The certainty that action came first, meaning later, no longer held as firmly. Meaning began to surface on its own. She found herself pausing without intention. Mid-step, mid-breath. Pauses that did not lead anywhere. The choice she had made stopped feeling clean. It felt specific. Too specific to be neutral. She began to sense what the suitcase represented beyond function. Not travel. Not departure. But exclusion. Everything inside it had been chosen deliberately. Everything outside had been left without ceremony. That imbalance surfaced now. She noticed what she had not packed. Not items. Intervals. Possibilities that did not fit neatly into compartments. The suitcase had promised simplicity. Now it revealed precision. And precision carried consequence. Her calm no longer felt like strength. It felt practiced, maintained through repetition rather than belief. There were moments when her body leaned toward the suitcase before stopping. Moments when her hand lifted, then rested again at her side. Awareness rising without instruction. She understood, slowly, that the mistake was not in leaving. It was in how completely she had closed off her vision. How confidently she had mistaken momentum for clarity. The suitcase did not challenge her. It did not demand reevaluation. Its silence made the realization heavier. She had assumed regret would arrive loudly, if it arrived at all, with urgency, with unmistakable force. Instead, it arrived quietly, as alignment, as recognition. She saw the decision more clearly now. Not as necessary, not as wrong, but as incomplete. The room felt altered by this awareness. Not because anything had changed, but because she could no longer avoid what had already been set in motion. The suitcase remained closed. And for the first time, that felt irreversible. She did not open the suitcase. There was no sudden movement toward undoing. No rush to reclaim what had been set aside. Only a stillness that felt newly weighted. The room seemed farther away from her now. Not physically. In relevance. She stood where she had been standing all along. But the posture no longer matched the moment. What once felt composed now felt fixed. The suitcase remained closed. Unchanged. Certain. She understood then that the mistake was not hidden inside it. It was already complete. Finished the moment she stopped allowing herself to look back. There was no sharp pain in this understanding. No dramatic collapse. Just a clear settling of facts. She saw that the decision had worked exactly as intended. It had carried her forward. It had removed complexity. And in doing so, it had removed something else. Something that could not be packed. Something that required hesitation to survive. The pressure she had ignored earlier no longer pressed. It had thinned into absence, into quiet confirmation. She did not reach for the handle this time. Not because she resisted, but because reaching no longer suggested change. The future the suitcase represented still existed. That was not the loss. The loss was narrower, more precise. It was the version of herself that believed correction would always be possible. That momentum could be slowed without cost. That certainty did not harden. She stood with that realization without protest, without bargaining. The room offered no response. The suitcase offered no return. Somewhere beyond this moment, movement would continue. Plans would proceed. The decision would hold. She remained still. Not because she was unsure, but because she was no longer early enough to be. Not every opportunity disappears. Some simply do not return. Quietly. Without warning. If you have ever thought, I should have acted then, this story may have reached you.